Something interesting for me related to territorial acknowledgement is Pay Elementary, which I got to visit last week and learned a lot about the linkage between belonging and how important that is in terms of foundations to how well you are connected to your learning. So really enjoyed that. Also Gung Hoi Fat Choi, Lunar New Year, and Black History Month. So there's a really important event happening at the Vancouver Public Library called Afronautics. It's around educational research of, imagine if you were a futuristic researcher and you got a chance to see the evidence of Canada's Black communities and histories, with the key message that once the past is acknowledged, the future will change. So that might be worth checking out. It's on February 15th and it's part of Black History Month. So part of all this is also to make an introduction, to know all of who's here tonight. So I will welcome everyone to just say your name, the organization or group that you're with or representing, and anything else you want the group to know about yourself. And before we do that, I will just mention our meeting decorum, which is all members and delegates request to speak through the chair, that we exercise civility towards others, and make sure that's maintained as stakeholder representatives and trustees share perspectives and participate in debate, and that staff are able to submit objective reports without influence or pressure as their work is acknowledged and appreciated, that committee members refrain from personal, inflammatory, accusatory language or action, and finally that committee members, trustees, representatives, and staff present themselves in a professional and courteous manner. So with that, I will start introductions maybe on my left. Yep.
Thank you. Rob Schindel, Associate Superintendent.
Nancy Louis, reporter.
I'm Selma Smith. I'm presenting tonight.
Estrelita Gonzalez, trustee.
Damien Willman, Principal, John Oliver Secondary School, Vassar Rep.
Cho, committee member.
Nana Hamaguchi, Director of Instruction. Magdalena Cassis, Director of Instruction.
Lois Tran-Pentley, trustee.
Amanda Hillis, DPAC rep.
Swana Eng, PDIC rep. Hannah Oldes, presenter.
Darren Taraposky, Vesta.
Shelby Coleman, VFTA.
Jonathan Warish, Principal Grenfell and VEPFA rep.
Janet Fraser, trustee.
Aaron Davis, Director of Instruction.
Alan Long, trustee.
Suzanne Hoffman, Superintendent.
Barb Parrott, trustee.
Julie Langlois, Associate Superintendent.
Adrian Pio, Director of Instruction.
Carmen Batista, Associate Superintendent.
Dry Fisher, communications.
Shazad Samji, Assistant Secretary Treasurer.
And David Nelson, Deputy Superintendent.
Thank you and welcome everyone and guests in the back. Remember, we're being live streamed, so just keep that in mind as we continue this evening. I'd like to make an amendment to the agenda to make room for our delegation. Hannah, thank you for introducing yourself. And are there any, I'd like to make an amendment to the agenda. Can I get a second for that? Thank you, Carmen. Carmen Cho.
What's the topic?
For the delegation. The topic of the delegation is student learning experiences and how that affects well-being overall. All right, so without further delay, we'll start with the delegation, followed by question and answer, then move to information items, of which we have 3 presented by District Principal Smith, and then 2 presented by Associate Superintendent Langlois on the topics of anti-racism initiatives and update, music programming in elementary schools, District Mandarin programs update. We've got a discussion item about the all-on-board motion, and 2 items for approval, board authority authorized courses, and school calendar. So that is what's before us tonight. So without further delay, we will hand it over to the delegation. Yes, and you have 10 minutes total to present so that we have time for question and answer.
Just gonna.
Hi, my name is Angela Gray, and the reason I was asked to come here is to talk about some of the long-term impacts around systemic racism in the school board, in the school system. My son was a part of, he went to 2 elementary schools on Kitsilano on the west side. He also went to a high school on the west side as well. And I guess it saddens me because he's 22 years old and he still talks about his experience in school. And it dates back to when he was 12 and profiled by a teacher. A teacher that I thought would be a good fit for him in his grade 7 class. Had a way of dealing with the kids by segregating the class, using the model of the 5 boroughs of New York. And his favorite students and the students that did the best were in the best bureau, and racially different kids and who were not behaving in accordance to what he felt they should be in the class were in the last bureau. That was my son. He rebelled, was taken out of the class, and during that time, without discussion with me, this teacher approached his classmates and asked if he was a part of a gang. My son was 12 years old. He is a mixed race, part Jamaican, part Aboriginal, and part Caucasian. The segregation in the class stopped after I met with the administration, the school counselor. I had brought a counselor in of my own as well. My son never was offered an apology or an acknowledgement of the impact of that experience, and nor did the teacher confirm or deny, which is what he said, I cannot confirm or deny that this occurred. In high school, he was volunteering for a school dance when he was in grade 11, and another student was inappropriately groping students on the dance floor. He wasn't in the dance at that time, he was volunteering. He was profiled at that dance by other students and almost arrested by the school liaison police officer. From that time, he chose to shave his head and go bald because that made him fit in better. He didn't look Black or Aboriginal when he had a shaved head. And he did that until he was 21 years old. And he still talks about that experience. And the reason I want to present that is because there are systemic issues within the school board, and I think it starts here. And I think that I am sure that you do great work and have done great things, but I think it's not okay and not just to have a decent program in place ongoing to support all students around racial equity and diversity. And I think that what we've seen here today, or what we will see here more today, is that these issues are still occurring. And I can go through a whole list of things that happened with my son, and I don't need to do that because I think other students can speak to that. But I don't think it's enough for me as a parent going in and doing Black History Month presentations and making sure that there's posters in the hallway. I think that equity has to be a part of the curriculum on a day-to-day basis. And I think that funding needs to be a priority here. And it is here that you can show that you support that idea ongoing. Because my son, who's 22, shouldn't still be talking about these issues. He's had counseling. He's talked to school counselors. We've done family counseling. He's still talking about it. And it's only been in the last year that he's willing to grow his hair out and look and take on his identity with pride. I can't be the only parent, the only person doing that in our home. And it's the responsibility of you as school board to support the community in these efforts. You're the leaders. And I think that's all I need to say.
My name is Koju. I graduated from Sorensen Churchill in 2011. And I was called to speak here today because I realized in my experience that there was always this culture of complicity, for me at least, when I would experience something like that, being the only person of African descent in my year for most years. And so when an incident would happen, there was an expectation attached to it that I would just laugh it off because, it's all a joke. But the accumulation of those events over years, for someone who otherwise considers themselves to have had a pretty privileged education in Vancouver, is debilitating because at a certain point you start to lose your identity. You don't really know whether you can be Black unapologetically. And since you can't really be white or Asian as a replacement, then you kind of lose yourself in society. And so I think about those experiences too, on a daily basis. And not having any, visible people of African descent, either in the faculty or in other students to connect with. It's very isolating. And then you lose the ability to even react. And then taking it a step further, going into adulthood and meeting other people of African descent, now I've lost the ability to connect with them too, because in my high school experience, I didn't get that opportunity. So I just wanted to share that it's very isolating to have those things happen to you, have no one to speak about it with, no real mechanisms or programs or courses of action to take, and you feel stuck and alone.
Good evening. My name is Hannah Wallace. I am a graduate from Sir Charles Tapper in 2016, and I'm currently a political science student. And I'm also a member of the BC Multiculturalism Advisory Council, which is a legislative body that advises the minister responsible for multiculturalism and anti-racism actions in BC. I'm here to share my lived experience and give some feedbacks, helpful feedbacks that will improve our schools and make Vancouver school district more welcoming and inclusive for all. So as most of you may know, the report that came out on Canada statistics shows that just hate crime has risen by 47% just in about a year. And that really does concern me. And it concerns me about like the hateful experience that young Black kids face in their schools. And like it also concerns me the way these kind of reports have been treated, or the way they've been faced and addressed, and they're not being named for what they are. And most of the time, these actions are hateful actions, and they're hateful crimes. And children also do have the right to feel safe and protected in their schools. And if they do not feel these, that means their human rights are being violated. And when these kind of incidents, racist actions happen in school, students should have teachers or staff or counselors that look like them in the school system being present there so that they feel valued, accepted, and heard for real, because we need somebody that can resonate with their experiences. I also would like to see teachers being provided with the tools that they need. So they do need a mandatory training on anti-racism, discrimination, and inclusion. So on Pro-D days or whatnot, teachers do have trainings, but these are not mandatory. And that means they do not have the tools if students go up to them, like with like a student that's being attacked, go up to them and ask for help. So anti-Black racism, discrimination training should be mandatory. And the other point that I would like to mention is representation in schools and the board. Students should be able to see themselves represented in their teachers, staff, and counselors. So if they do not have somebody that looks like them being in these positions, they don't have any aspirations, they don't feel like they're being represented. So we need to work on more diversity, so diversifying our staff, school board, administration, and everybody. I remember I came to Canada at the age of 15. So when I got here, I went to Tupper, and I was one of the few Black kids, and I was the only Black girl in my school. And I remember the time that I saw a Black teacher, and I do remember, till this day, I remember what kind of feeling that I got, because it was a strong connection of like seeing somebody that looks like me working in the system and teaching. That wasn't even my teacher. Like I don't think there was any Black teacher in the system. It was just a substitute teacher, and just seeing him in the hallway and acknowledging the fact that he exists and I exist was a really strong feeling. And not thinking about that every day you go to school, that's also a privilege. So yeah, and last but not least, I also would like to recommend somebody like in this board or in some higher level that's responsible for anti-Black racism. So specific person, a Black person responsible for Black issues. So a Black board member that's transparent so that students or parents can complain to and get results. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the three of you for having the.
There's one other person who just arrived, would like to speak as well.
Yes, so yes, we only have 10 minutes for each delegation, but we would like to open up the floor for questions from stakeholders in that as part of the committee. So since we've heard like the three individuals speak, that brings us to our 10-minute mark, unfortunately, but I wanted to open the floor for questions and also take a moment to acknowledge the courage it takes to share your story, both personally, but also on behalf of young students and alumni who aren't here. It really does give meaning to committees like this to actually hear from you, and I know that it does take a lot of courage to speak from your own personal experience, so thank you for that.
I know it's only 10 minutes. But there's a current student, and I'm not to take away from the fact that we have alumni here, but there's a current student, I think, who would like to speak. Can give him 2 minutes, that would be great.
Okay, is it okay with the committee if we allow for 2 minutes for a current student to speak? Welcome.
Hello, I'm George Moran. I go to Britannia Secondary. Racism in high school isn't as bad in elementary, at least my experience. The racism I fought in elementary was kids wouldn't let me play because of my color. They literally said that to me. They called me the N-word all the time. They would just discriminate on me, and I felt I just felt so bad about myself because I know it wasn't my fault for being this color, but I just felt so bad about myself. And I feel that kids in elementary don't really know what they were talking about because they weren't educated enough. And you have to start educating kids at a younger age so they know the history or something, the history around Black history and what the N-word actually means. In high school, it's not really like beating people up and stuff. It's more just the racial slurs and stuff. Like there's so many people who say the N-word, who say like discriminating words to Asian people of multiple colors and races. And I feel maybe a way to change that is kids could be educated at a younger age, and then when they're in high school or something, there could be like a catch up from what they were taught at like grade 5 or 6 maybe. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Thanks so much for your willingness to speak, and to the committee to also allow for an additional speaker. Thank you so much. And also to you for the courage to share your own experience and remind us how important those formative elementary school years are as well, because we hadn't heard that yet. So thank you. Questions from the committee or comments? Trustee Wong, and then Fraser.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you for the presentations. I have a question for the gentleman that graduated from Churchill School. And thank you for others for offering suggestions and advice of how the district can move forward and assist in anti-racism. You spoke about feeling isolated, and also do you have any recommendations for the board, the district, with regards to that feeling isolated.
I know it's a really difficult issue because there's just, not many Black people in Vancouver. So it's hard to find those representatives and or teachers or whatever it may be. But it might actually start with the education of Black history, like George mentioned. Having kids know at a younger age, like, yes, Black people do exist, and maybe it's not okay to be pointing this stuff out because it tears down people's character. Maybe just, I'm kind of at a loss sometimes. When I think about these things, it's even tough to come up with suggestions because it feels like a problem that's never really been solved for me and never really been solved for anybody around me. So I'm not quite sure, to be honest.
Can I speak to that? I'm just going to go back in a little bit of history. I was adopted actually into a Caucasian family, and I lived in an isolated, all Caucasian place. So I know what that isolation feels like. And it's unfortunate that my son actually says the same thing. What I can say that helped was that he had a good vice principal and school counselor in high school that helped support him through that he could talk to somebody about it. What is difficult is not having models. That's difficult. That is one thing that bridges that isolation, is to have people that empower your students in their race, whether it be through educational materials, whether it just be that there's a presence that it is okay. And I think that is a place that you start, because we're not in a diverse Vancouver. So where do you work from? You work from materials, you work from your education sources, you have guest speakers come in, you want, like the National Film Board has all these materials. So that's what you work with, because you don't have the other.
I had Trustee Fraser, then as Trustee Gonzalez.
So actually, Alan covered a little bit of what I was going to ask, but I think maybe I'll just say that I do appreciate you coming in to share your personal stories with us, even though I know it could be hard, because it reminds us as trustees that these are, it puts a personal story to what's happening when you hear things globally. And referring to the report, you can look at numbers and think about how many people are impacted, but when you hear a personal story, it has a different impact on us. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you to all to come, and it's very courageous to come here, and also your insight into some possible solutions. I'm wondering, with Black Lives Matter, what the formal relationship is with the board, and if there is, knowing that's one organization that exists in our city, if there's a way to work in a closer manner with them throughout the schools to have that as a resource, if there is anything actually formalized with them.
Trustee Gonzalez, does anyone want to comment?
I can certainly comment just at a high level. I know that our Associate Superintendent, Jody Langlois, has been meeting with members of our Black community to gain further insights, ideas, and suggestions. And I know our board chair and myself, we've actually reached out to my executive assistant yet, or have plans to meet with the Black Lives Matter members here in Vancouver. So again, we can continue to learn and understand and rectify things so that it's a preferred future going forward.
Yeah, just wanting to add to that, I think it's an important distinction that Black Lives Matter would be a representative globally of a more nuanced, diverse community. But yes, that there are also opportunities to reach out to individuals who may or may not identify with Black Lives Matter as an organized group. Yeah. Other questions, comments, final questions and comments?
Maybe if just to wrap up, I too would like to express appreciation for you coming and sharing your perspectives with us this evening. You spoke about equity, and that's something that very much we are conscious of, inequities within our system, and it is a conversation that we are very much looking to engage individuals with. So through our chair, Trustee Reddy, I will reach out further to follow up and hear personal stories, and we'll glean and learn what we can from you as we go forward, because that's an important concept that I think we need to address as a system. So thank you for bringing that up.
Suzanne? Just one additional written statement. from a student who wasn't able to make it. So I'm going to submit that and share that.
So copies of it? Thank you, Seth. Thank you so much to the delegation. Any final comments? Trustee Fraser?
Just make the comment that, you know, we're always looking to improve in the district. We're always looking to improve when we serve our students, and when we're aware of individual groups of students or even individual students who are not feeling welcome, who are not able to achieve the educational success that we want to see for every student in the district, then that is when we should be taking action as a board, and we should be working with our staff in the schools to make sure that what we want to achieve as a board is happening on the ground.
Trustee Cho?
Yeah, sorry to add something at the last minute through the chair. I just wanted to also thank you for coming, but also to say I really think as a board we need to focus on this kind of work in elementary schools, because I have a daughter in grade 5, and some of the things that those kids say, and I just think it's lack of understanding and knowledge, and they need to be educated when they're very, very young. So I think if we could focus on that, the really early education, and that would do a lot to help them when they're in high school, because they'll already know better. But I think when we wait till high school, it's too late. So it needs to be something that we implement at quite a young age. So I hope that we can all kind of try to work towards that.
Thank you so much. We don't really take questions. Yeah. And sorry, we don't really take questions from the audience at large, it's more for the delegation. So any other questions or comments from the committee members? Trustee Fair?
I suppose it would be an owner's job to find out what schools and teachers are particularly doing this month to celebrate Black History Month. I don't know how that could be done, but I suspect that there are things happening in our schools, and it would be interesting to find out some of them. I know that on Wednesday I'm going to Seymour, which is my one of my liaison schools, and I'm going to read to the kindergartens a book about Black history at the kindergarten level and talk about this. But I bet there are things going on everywhere that would be really interesting to me.
Trustee Cho, thank you. Trustee Fair.
Thank you, the chair. I agree with that as well, but I think one thing we want to make sure of, it's too easy if it's just Black History Month. I think it needs to be embedded, sort of the way SOGI is embedded in curriculum and the way we talk about things and the way that it's now just become accepted and people don't think twice about it. So I think instead of just a month, it needs to be sort of embedded in everything that we do.
And through the chair, in response to Trustee Parrott, I think in some of our subsequent presentations this evening, some of the work we do have in place will be showcased, but I acknowledge that there's more we have.
Thank you. And yeah, one final comment from the chair, through the chair, was just around, yes, like just making a distinction between celebratory activities and knowledge, and as well as historical injustices and how that plays out in present day student lives and staff lives as well. So, that's that for that agenda item. Thank you. Thank you so much to the delegation. We really appreciate you coming out. You're welcome to stay for the duration of the meeting. There are 5 other topics, so you're welcome to stay as well. Yeah. But you don't have to, yes. No, there's no, leave it anytime. Yeah, that's fine too, yes. That goes, yeah, exactly. For anyone else, yeah. Okay, so the next item here is being presented by, what's the first name of this person?
Selma.
Okay. So I'd like to welcome Selma Smith, District Principal, presenting on District Anti-Racism Initiatives and Updates.
Wait.
Settle in.
So thank you very much for having me here this evening. I'm Selma Smith. I'm a district principal in our Learning Services Department, and I just would like to also acknowledge the courage for our guests here tonight to share their personal stories. I'm here tonight to talk to you about some of the different initiatives that our district has been involved with and continues to improve and work on addressing racism in our district. I want to acknowledge, oh, there we go. Just the importance that, the district has a strategic plan, and I just, for your reference, would like to acknowledge that in our district strategic plan that we do want to create, obviously, a culture of care and shared responsibility. And the objective 5 that, we are respecting and celebrating all forms of diversity is in the plan. So as a district, we are committed to provide anti-racism support and resources for staff, students, and our families. And one way that we work to achieving that is through 2 main areas. We have a district diversity advisory committee, which consists of stakeholder representatives, as well as community organizations that are on the committee. We also have youth that have our current students in our district that volunteer and come on our committee and provide their own personal experience as well too. And over the years, we have actually found that having youth on the committee have given us the most brilliant ideas of what we need to do as a district. So that's been just amazing, and we value it so much. And I mean, the committee works to create and recommend programs and support to integrate diversity in all forms of education in our district, and especially through curricular activities. The committee also works to address emerging issues that are happening in the district related to diversity and inclusive practices, and how these issues can be addressed effectively throughout the district. We also have a district resource teacher for diversity. And the teacher, oops, right side. This is not used to this clicker, sorry folks. Oh boy, I just. Sorry, thanks. Yeah, the next slide. Sorry, that clicker is really there. That's fine. Sorry, folks. I don't mean to be disrespectful to take it off topic. So our district diversity resource teacher is a full-time teacher that works in our district to be the lead in providing direct support to staff, support to students, and also support to families and the community. And they assist in developing curricular materials. If students or families would like to reach out to our staff person for support, the person's available, and to help address issues around racism and discrimination. Our district resource teacher, her name is Renee Hogg, and she's a full-time employee in this role. And she provides ongoing training throughout the year, not just on Pro D days, but also on other days as well too. Sometimes she provides lunch and learns to school as well. I'd like to just share with you some upcoming or recent activities that we've had. And we have a new program called Equity, and it stands for Educational Quest for Understanding, Inclusion, and Transforming Youth. And it's a program that is youth-focused and has just started up recently in a few of our high schools. And we actually had a session yesterday at Van Tech Secondary, so to launch that school's work in this area, and at John Oliver Secondary on February 27th, they're going to launch this program as well too, and it's youth focused. So that's exciting for us. And an upcoming professional development opportunity for the district on April 29th. Our district is going to be hosting a variety of sessions on diversity and inclusion and social justice. I know the VSTA has partnered with us in providing those sessions at John Oliver, so thank you to Secondary Teachers Union for that. I would like to just share with you a series of professional developments that have happened recently. And we have school events that are happening throughout the year. And so here we go. And we've had specific topics around addressing racism, discrimination, and hate. Starting in November 14th of this year, we had a session for principals. We've also developed a toolkit called Cultural Sensitivity and Humility Toolkit for principals. And on December 5th and 10th, we held some school events at Lord Byng Secondary that were student focused. Our diversity toolkit, we have a toolkit that has a whole range of resources around addressing racism. As well, we have a toolkit for SOGI. And this toolkit is available and accessible by any staff in the district. It's on our SharePoint, and regularly resources are being updated through there with, I know a lot of our teachers have been providing input and updating resources and sourcing out current best practice and literature. So that's available. And through our district resource teacher who's in this role, I know she sends out weekly emails to the contact list who then get updated information. And just recently, I know there have been some new videos and literature that were put on there for our teachers. So for district workshops, coming up next Friday is District Prody Day. And we're very fortunate that one of our secondary teachers, Nikita Fester, she's partnering with Renee, and they're offering a session on Friday the 15th next week at McGee Secondary on courageous conversations, confronting our discomfort around issues of diversity. So we're looking forward to that one. We also have Dr. Jennifer Cates from UBC, who's hosting a session as well Friday afternoon at McGee on teaching to diversity. So we're working towards trying to provide ongoing Pro-D for our staff. And as I mentioned, the April 29th District Pro-D that's coming up on diversity, inclusion, and social justice. So in terms of the diversity toolkit, I mentioned how that's available through SharePoint. We're also currently working on a staff and student handbook. The student handbook actually came from students who actually asked us and said, where are my resources around how I can get support if I'm being faced with racism or discrimination. So currently we have some of our teachers and youth that have been working on that resource, and at the district diversity committee is where those resources are being worked through. So that's exciting as a good tool. And for staff as well, there's a resource booklet that's in draft right now, and that district diversity committee is working through that. So we hope by the next meeting or the following one that will be finalized and can be shared for our community. I just wanted to highlight an amazing project called Our Stories. I don't know if any of you have heard about it or in any of your schools. We have a partnership with, it was a TELUS, City of Vancouver project to highlight some of the communities in our vibrant city to show people's lived experience through immigration and settlement here in Vancouver. So that's been done. And the booklet that I was talking about there, the staff handbook, it's right now we have it titled Questions and Answers for School Community Members Responding to Racism, Hate, and Discrimination. And it's meant to be a resource that folks have an understanding of how to best respond and where to get support. So moving forward, we're very committed to continue to provide as many educational training opportunities for our staff, as well as engaging and working collaboratively with community partners, youth, and parents. So we are learning, just as as the kids are as well too, and parents, about resources that are coming out. I think Jody, you brought some resources that you're going to share later for folks if you wanted to have a look.
Yeah, I just want to say that it's a really small, very small, because much of the stuff that we have is it's in draft form, so it's not information yet, and some of them are videos, again, which they're hard to do. There are PowerPoints. I've referenced one PowerPoint in just the cover page of that, not the whole PowerPoint. Again, we want to make sure that things are on the draft formats, but there's lots in that
Yeah, and I guess I just thank you for that, Jody. And I want to mention that we're continually putting a bank of resources and working with our staff and community partners. But the other important item that we're committed to doing is is going into schools and co-teaching. So our district resource teacher for diversity will lead lessons or co-teach with teachers in order to work together to model some of the lessons and activities. So that's within her role to do that as well, because we understand it's a very sensitive topic that can be triggering. And so having an opportunity for teachers to work collaboratively with another colleague around this topic is something that we definitely take as a priority. And we're continuing to expand as we learn, and including anti-racism supports as well for all of our schools, so staff and students and parents know where to go. So just before I take any questions, I just wanted to share a piece of information that I did not put up here. So I'd like to let everyone know at the last Diversity Advisory Committee, there was an agreement to put forward a recommendation to the board to approve a motion to reinstate its commitment to anti-racism. And I'll let Trustee Wong, who's on the committee, speak about that, if you would like.
Okay, at this point. Through the chair. So we had the first diversity committee meeting of the new board in January, and there was discussion and a presentation by the diversity teacher, and the committee members discussed that and agreed that this goes forward to the board, and if the board can support this motion, that the Vancouver Board of Education reaffirms its commitment to eliminating racism. Furthermore, the board supports the development, implementation, and evaluation of procedures, programs, and services that promote and support the principles of anti-racism education. So that's stemming from the diversity committee. So there's, through the chair, there's agreement that can go to the board.
Wrong item. 1 second, Trustee Wong. Here we go.
Well, that's just part of the, throw the motion out there first. And then there's further to that of the committee, to the diversity committee. And I think it's, as to the board, and I think we need to have, being a new board, that the board and this committee needs support with regards to anti-racism. And I think that would be helpful if we can reach out, and that's what the advisory committees are for, that if we can reach out and ask the diversity committee to outline current initiatives within the Vancouver school districts currently that support anti-racism, and as well ask the diversity committee for initiatives planned for the future as well. So to give us direction, to start us in that steps to see what the committee and the boards can do with regards to anti-racism. So I think it's best to reach out and gather this from the committee first. So.
Thank you, Trustee Wong. Questions, comments from the floor, and then as well, I wanted to thank you, Selma, and also wish to maybe come back to you as well, and
sure,
folks have questions. Yeah. Thank you. So I've got Trustee Parrott and then Mr. Woolman.
Chair, do you remember the motion, the wording of the motion that we passed in December? I think the first sentence is the same, but I'm not sure.
It is different, I would say. I brought forward that motion in December, so I'll say it is different. But this has a different nature, so I would say Trustee Wong, if you want to speak to that. But I've got Wilman on the list, and then I've got Trustee Fraser, then Darren, then Shelby, then Amanda. Let me just write that down. Fraser, Darren, Shelby. Trustee Wong, did you want to speak to that?
Yes, just to leave it, if we left the first sentence out, it sort of leaves it out of context. So it goes together, and this is how it was discussed at the committee. So this is how the committee supported it.
You should just say reaffirms.
Thank you, Trustee Wong, for clarification that this is coming from the Diversity Advisory Committee and therefore is a separate motion in and of itself. So, Mr. Billman?
Through the board, through the chair, I'd like to acknowledge the great work that Selma's team is actually doing in the district and the value that it brings into schools. And I think Bob pointed it out that sometimes when we have big events like History Month, this can be a great opportunity to have those conversations, but how does it get to the deeper level? Well, the work that Rennie Hawk and the diversity team are doing is actually perforating right down into the depth of schools. I must also acknowledge the work of our colleagues in the VSTA. I went into a classroom today and asked about the work that was going on in a social studies class, and they referred to this month's newsletter and about the resources that were being shared out through the newsletter. So I appreciate that on behalf of our school. It is always worrying to hear the type of behavior and the type of experiences of students. I've been in the school board for 30 years. Racism has been there, and we know that. And so the goal, of course, is to create a fully inclusive environment where everyone is safe and where they can learn without intimidation, and particularly from experiencing systemic issues. Part of what we do at our school site, I know others do the same, is to create opportunities for ongoing and continued professional engagement and professional dialogue. Example of that is Black History Month itself. Our school growth committee is preparing with the school to roll out a number of important readings for staff, but at a deeper level, we're getting it into the curriculum. I think the model that I would parallel along with is to look at how we've worked to infuse Indigenous education understanding into the school, how we've, I think, made tremendous progress to get Indigenous students feeling welcome and also a greater understanding from the entire school community. I now have students coming in from grade 7 into grade 8, fully conscious of residential schools, a legacy of residential schools. So we have a real scaffolding to build. So there is great work going on there. It's great that our attention has been drawn to this specific issue, but I'd like to acknowledge the work that is going on and say thank you to the people that are.
Mr. Bowman, going to Trustee Fraser.
I didn't mean to be on the list.
Okay, Shelby. Darren? Darren, then Shelby, thank you.
Yeah, just speaking specifically to this motion here, I think also looking at funding for learning resources in our classrooms and our libraries where students see themselves represented, that learning resources that promote understanding and respect and recognize the point of view and the contributions and experiences of our diverse learners and all different cultural groups and our Indigenous peoples is also important as part of addressing it. And if I can just also add, in terms of the motion that the trustees passed on December 17th, our members really appreciate that the wording of that statement is specific to the racist nature of the incident that occurred and that it acknowledges the impact of the events on the Black community. And I'm not sure if this report by Selma is an action in response to that statement by our trustees. We support in-service for our members, as well as Pro-D initiatives and tools for our members mentioned in Selma's report. And we also hope that this statement will lead to specific actions related to anti-Black racism and not just dealt under the general theme of racism or anti-bullying. Further, when we were discussing this at our executive meeting, we noted that trustees also passed a motion at that same board meeting to implement the Truth and Reconciliation Committee recommendations. And our members feel that we need to make the institutional and social changes to address racism arising from colonialism and white privilege that affect our Indigenous families, among others. So I was going to ask if in the report from Selma if any of the anti-racism initiatives specifically address racism faced by Indigenous learners and their families. Through the chair.
Yeah, for sure. I have to say that we work very collaboratively with our Indigenous Education Department. Chaz, our district principal, is on our diversity committee, and I know that Renee, our DRT for diversity, works very collaboratively with the staff in the department. The April 29th Pro D that's coming up, we're so thrilled that the Indigenous Education Department, VSTA, us are all working collaboratively to be intersectional as opposed to being in silos. We learned last year we had a Pro D day with all of our respective departments at different high schools on the same day. So then decided let's plan together and work together and offer so that staff didn't have to travel around the city. So we're really looking forward to that day, and I feel like it's a step in the right direction to be breaking down silos.
Thank you, Selma. Thank you, Darren. I've got Shelby, then myself, then Alan.
I just wanted to thank Selma as well as the entire diversity team, the Health and Service Department, for all the work that you guys have been putting in, and also for partnering with the VSTA on the Pro D that's coming up. We at the VSTA, we actually just passed our own motion that we affirm our commitment to combating racism and supporting marginalized person or persons within our school district. The VSTA as well as the BCTF have both provided numerous social justice resources for teachers, as we are a social justice union. So I have actually brought some of the resources that have slightly been highlighted. So if anyone wants to see some examples of our newsletter that have resources for Black History Month for teachers, and also highlights the diversity toolkit and whatnot, and also some resources from the BCTF. This one has to do with a privilege wheel that the BCTF has created, and there's a lot of examples online as well. So I wanted to share that with any members of the committee that would like a copy. And I also wanted to actually put out an invite to anybody in the room that's interested in maybe collaborating on not just a teacher level, but just for everyone within the entire district, workshops around like checking our privilege, how to be an ally, things around that the VSTA could host. So just an idea. Yeah, and I also wanted to point out some of the work that's being done in our schools as well. There's actually a high school that has struck a co-committee with students and teachers. It's a diversity committee, and they're currently working on initiatives within the school right now. So if anyone wants any.
Thanks so much, Shelby. I'm going to go to Amanda, and then to myself, and then Trustee Wong.
So through the chair, there's two things I wondered about. One was the school-based safe contacts identified for every school. Is there a way that, how does the students find out about it, and can the PPAC sort of find out about it? So we have parents who ask, because children sometimes will ask at home, and then the parents want to find a resource rather than at home.
Respond. We currently are working towards establishing an anti-racism contact in each school. We have a SOGI school lead with the SOGI model. Renee is the district lead and has SOGI leads in each school. And we, through the anti-racism contact at each school, we want to follow the same model, but we want to work with our teachers unions and other stakeholder groups to find out if that's the best model. Our district used to have separate contacts for each, and I'm going to not to speak for VSTA, but you have the social justice reps, right, in each school. So that's another mechanism. I know that teachers get information. So we're going to review that and explore what would be best practice to get information and how parents and students would know who the safe contact is at the school. Because we've had over the years different names for different roles. So I think that can cause a little confusion, but we'll take that to the diversity committee and work with our stakeholder reps there to find out which would be the best way moving forward. And I agree with you, having it transparent so students and families know who they can go to.
Thank you. And just for my second one, what the equity program, is that just a one-time thing? Is it ongoing? What does it look like?
So it's a new program that's being actually launched at John Oliver, where Damien's the principal, and Ventec. So it's our staff and school staff and students are putting together some resources and programs so that they could share with their classmates and peers around their learning around anti-racism and human rights and social justice. So they're going to take a project and work through that and then share their learning.
Thanks so much, Amanda. And just a couple of questions from me. One was just around thanking you for your work and presentation and recognizing that that's a very small team that's taking on quite a bit of things you mentioned, like staff, student, families, and community support. But recognizing in reference to the safe contact person, arguably with all of those efforts in place, anyone could be a safe contact in the school, including peers themselves. And it sounds like that's part of the solution for us, is thinking about students as their own builders of safe communities at school and beyond. So one of my questions was, how is diversity defined by the committee broadly?
That's a really good question. I would say that it is a broad name with the intention for it to be very inclusive in terms of I see it as diversity as a positive, well-rounded term that could include neurodiversity, physical, whether it's through sexual orientation, race, gender. It's a broad theme, so I see it as including as many different areas.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So I've got Trustee Wong and then Trustee Cho and then Trustee Fraser.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Chairperson. And I know at the Diversity Committee that Selma is holding back a lot. Everyone's really excited at the committee in that discussion. So, and there's so much more to present. So with limited time, just wanted to share that with the rest of the committee. My question is the same as Amanda's with regards to safe contact, and I guess we'll just discuss further at the Diversity Committee, which we have one in the next 2 months, one each for each month. In the past, and this is maybe not a question for Selma, but for staff, it's a little touchy one with regards to in-service and Pro-D. Can we, and the rest, the request of how to get that anti-racism training, so we get for the committee, the difference between Pro-D and in-service.
Trustee Wong.
Sure. Chair, I'm happy to respond, and then happy to have the VTF colleagues weigh in if I misrepresent or misspeak in any way. Professional development is at the professional autonomy of teachers. So teachers have the choice on professional development days to take teachings offerings at their choice. When we offer an in-service, that is something that we generally release teachers for. It's something that we would like teachers to do as a district. So that would be, we would perhaps release them with TTOC time to come into the board office so that there could be specific targeted training on a given topic. And that then becomes a cost item for us because we want to release teachers to take part in that. So I'm happy to be corrected. Fair enough, okay.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Suzanne. And I've got Trustee Cho.
Through the chair, I have 2 questions, but they're sort of interconnected. One is, I noticed in your presentation, there's a lot of professional development and education for teachers, but you didn't talk much about education for students. So I'm wondering if that's sort of something separate, like that.
through curriculum. So there a lot of the resources, I was very, I would say, brave. So our SharePoint has a huge bank of curricular resources. So classrooms, you know, through literature, through other types of work, it would be a way that this could be taught. But the youth opportunities where they're working, I would say, out of class around projects is another way. But I'd say the curriculum would be the first way where children would be getting this information.
And sort of related to that, the student handbook, what ages is that targeted at? 'Cause it sounds like something more for older kids to go and access as opposed to elementary school students.
We're looking at both elementary and secondary. So there's a draft document that right now the diversity committee that's going to be reviewing that, and through the youth that are on our committee as well. And we have teacher representatives on the committee. So we're looking for input from as many. And that we actually have a resource that's K-3 right now for resources around Black History Month. So a lot of work went into even creating resources for kindergarten students. So we don't want to leave anybody else in K-12. Yeah.
Trustee Cho, I've got Trustee Fraser and then Darren.
Going back to the handbook and how it came forward, was that the youth on the diversity committee who raised the issue of the need, or was there a different avenue that came forward?
That's a good question. I would say in the fall, there was talk about having resources for youth specific earlier, not this month. So we've been working on it since late fall.
Yeah, through the chair, it's my understanding that in the past, we didn't just have one diversity mentor, but that position was, there were several, one of them being an anti-racism mentor specifically. Is that something the board would consider restoring?
So any background on the positions? Thank you, Susan.
I can't speak to the background of the positions because I wasn't in the district at the time, but if there was a consideration of additional staffing in any of the portfolios, but specifically in this one, that would be something that our stakeholders, through their consultation process that we have underway, could feed back to staff that would bring that forward to the board for consideration through the budget process. So that would be the strategy as to how that would come up back to here. And similarly, if I could just segue an additional piece, same with the question about in-service. You know, if that was something, again, that the board felt they wanted to support or advocate for, then through the budget process, there would be an ability for the board to suggest that for consideration.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. So I've got Trustee Parent.
Chair, are we finished with this motion? Because I have a question that may lead to another motion.
Okay, sounds good. So any comments further on the motion on the table here? And if there are no objections right now, it would be going to the board meeting. Is that my understanding? Yes.
Sorry, I didn't answer part of your question when I was speaking to the additional staff. So I would ask that other staff that were in the district at the time could speak to what staff we had previously. Selma. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, that's right. So in the past, we had, I would say, a 0.6 anti-homophobia district teacher and a 0.4 anti-racism teacher. So both positions were combined to have a full-time diversity person, and the staffing is still there. It's just under diversity. So it hasn't been reduced. It's still full-time, and we have one person doing that role.
Sorry, we can't take questions.
But I can respond to that because I have some historical knowledge. So if you want.
Sure, would that be okay if you could explain it to me afterwards?
Sure.
Is that all right? Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't any other comments on this motion and support to make sure that we could take it to the next board meeting. Yeah. And then Trustee Parent, so you were going to follow up.
Chair, at the last school board meeting, we received information that the practice of slave days was still going on in some schools. And I'm wondering if anyone here can confirm or deny that. And if it is happening, then I have a motion to do that I would like us to take to the board. around that.
Any questions, comments, Suzanne?
So it was, a comment was made by our chair at the last meeting with respect to that the board was not supportive of that in any shape or form, and that we would follow up with staff. So I'm going to ask our Deputy Superintendent, David Nelson, to speak to that, because he did follow up, as we said we would at the board meeting.
So through the chair, we have, I can assure Trustee Parrott that there are no schools that have slave days or slave auctions. That may have been a relic of the past. So it's not a practice that's currently happening in schools. But further to that, we have asked all of our administrators to reflect upon student practices more broadly, just to ensure there are no practices that in any way emulate or might be construed in that way that people hadn't thought you might see in that light. So absolutely no practices that where we're talking about slaves or slave auctions, and we're also just really asking our admin to work and reflect upon to make sure there's not even more subtle practices that could anyway be construed in that way.
Chair, I think I will, in hearing that answer, because I think it fits with what you just said, I think I will suggest that we take to the board a statement that says, do we have it? Yeah. That the VSB state its opposition to any form of slave auction, slave day, or student for hire activities that are patterned in such a way to offer the services of human beings through a bidding process or mimic a slave auction process.
Thank you, Trustee Parrott. I think we do have that for the
I'm really glad to hear what you reported. I was teaching in the 80s, and that's when there were slave auctions, and you know, I sort of thought I'd gotten rid of that. So I'm really happy with that. But I think this fits with what you're saying about reminding asking administrators to keep this in mind, and I think this tells our community what our position is on this as well.
Thank you. So any comments, questions around this motion being presented by Trustee Parrott? Suzanne?
I realize I don't get to vote on the motion, but I would just not want that motion to be misconstrued in any way to have people believe that that was happening. That would be my only fear, but I support the fact that we want to ensure that it never does happen. That would just be a fear that I would have.
So maybe we could add the phrase something like, while this is not happening in the district, we want to ensure that we state our opposition.
Question for that, do we know for sure, like, are there, like, I like actually what David had said around like indirect or direct references to that we may or may not even be aware of?
I think through the chair, I think from what we've heard today, we can be very certain that there is no form of slave auction, slave day, or student for hire activities that are patterned in such a way. Maybe I could ask that of our Deputy Superintendent. Can we be certain of that in the district?
Through the chair, there are no practices where we're offering slaves or having slave for a day in our schools. So I will defer to the board and whether or not they want to move this forward.
Any other comments? I've got Trustee Parrott.
Yeah, I mean, it's a dilemma. That's what's going through my head. If it's not happening, should we take a position? We certainly should if it is happening, but if it's not happening, do we want to bring it back again? And then I thought, because you had said that to the administrators to keep that focus, that maybe we should be doing the same thing too. But I think if it said something like in understanding that these don't occur in our district, we still want to, something like that.
Suzanne?
Just, perhaps this is something that we could take to community members who perhaps have a perspective on that perhaps Trustee Parrott and myself don't have or understand, and ask them whether that would be an appropriate statement to be made. And then it can come back for determination, just for consideration.
I guess if I can add one thing for myself too, is that no matter what, it would still be a valuable statement, and thank you for bringing it forward. So in any instance, yeah. David, anybody else?
I was also just going to say the work, just to add on to what Superintendent Hoffman said, that it also could be something that once those conversations happen through our diversity teacher as well, the diversity committee could take a look at it and provide some suggestion around how we might word it in a way that doesn't suggest it's happening, but also confirms our conviction to ensure that we don't have practices that in any way, would give a perception of that.
Any other comments or questions on this item? So it sounds like we want to have it returned back to the next Student Learning Wellbeing Committee meeting with the intention to discuss that further and word it so that we're in understanding of what is occurring in the district at the time with relevance to these activities referenced. Yep, Trustee Jody.
Chair, so just for clarification, it's going back to the diversity committee to discuss amongst stakeholders with that team as to what would be an effective statement, if any. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, and then we'll return back to this committee April 10th for our next meeting. Is that correct? Sophie, Trustee Parrott? All right. Thank you. All right. So thank you so much, Selma Smith, for your presentation and for the question and answers. Next up, we have Jody Langlois, Associate Superintendent, presenting on music programming in elementary schools. 10 minutes. Gotta say it. Yeah. 2 minutes, not 2, 10.
Good evening. So I'm here tonight, and I believe committee members that you have the report in your package, so I'm going to reference it. I'm not going to read it through, but basically what the report you have in front of you is talking about is we sent out a survey to the elementary schools to find out what was actually happening with music programming, be that general music programming through the curriculum or be it through optional band and strings programs. We just wanted to get an idea of what was actually happening in schools. As you can see by your report, I've attached numerous reports that have been done in the past. They were very thoroughly done. They give lots of context for where we are at today. And so that's there for your historical reading. And so the purpose of tonight is to actually talk to you about the questionnaire that we sent out, the survey that was going to help us determine what programs currently exist for students in the area of general music programming and optional band and strings. So I'm just going to walk you through the survey and the questions and sort of tell you the intent of the questions. And I'm going to ask Director Keogh if I miss anything to chime in, because he has a long history in this subject area too. And then what I'm going to do is we'll just talk about these and then we'll come back with you after we've had a chance to digest it. So this was the survey that was put out. Obviously, the first one is your school name. And then question number 2 asks you to please choose the statement that best describes your school. And if you can't see it, I will just read out that. School staffing includes a music specialist who primarily teaches music,
Or school staffing includes a music specialist who only teaches music to their staff. Oh, hang on. And C, school staff, they're just trying to make me seasick. School staff includes a music specialist who platoons with other classes, or school staffing does not include a music specialist. The intent of that was looking at what combination of music specialists are actually in the schools so that we can see what's currently happening. So if they, and then question 3 is just if you answered that yes, it was A, B, or C, what did that actually, how was it being reported out on? Question 4 goes down and it talks about if your music program is delivered using platooning, how many other classes are taught as part of that platooning? Platooning is when you're combining students together. And so I think that's what we're trying to get there is how many students are actually accessing the music program, because if you have one person teaching a class and it's a smaller number of students, it can be quite different if you're platooning. So we're actually just trying to get a sense of how many students are accessing music in different ways. You'll see number 5, it's self-explanatory. It's just asking which grades. We're trying to get a sense there of what grades are accessing music specialists. Some of them are, when we compile the data, we're going to take a look at, is it all the grades? Is it some of the grades? Are there some grades that never seem to be accessing? Or what are the similarities and differences between the schools? And what other structures could be possibly replicated in the other schools? So that's some of the information that we'll gain when we look at the readouts on that. Question number 6 is how many minutes of music education does each grade receive from a music specialist? That's a real nuance because, you know, some periods might be longer than others. So we actually want to see the number of minutes that students are getting from a music specialist. And that's quite informative to see how that goes through. Question number 7. Does a music specialist teach on a prep coverage model? And that is obviously when the music teacher is providing prep for a classroom teacher. And so we're looking at how many schools do provide prep coverage in this manner. We'll get that information out of there. Question 8, does your prep coverage model currently include music instruction for all students? And so does that mean that the whole school's getting prep coverage through music, or is it just some of the classes? Again, catching the variations that exist in the district. And question 9, if you answered no in question 8, approximately what percentage of class has music as a prep? So is it only one classroom in a school that's getting music as a prep, or is it all classrooms, or is it 50%, 40%? How does that actually look? And then we're on 10. Which statement best describes your school? Most classes receive music instruction in a single instructional period per week. Most classes receive music instruction over more than one instructional period per week. Again, seeing how much music is being taught in the schools and in what ways. Question 11 is looking, where is music instruction delivered? Is it in a shared space or is it in a regular classroom? So really taking a look at what physical structures best support music instruction or are most commonly used to support music instruction. Question 12, do you offer a band program taught by a VSB teacher? Yes or no? And that's going to tell us, we're trying to capture there how many of the VSB teachers are teaching the optional portions and how many are, you'll see later in the survey, and how many are done by communities. So question 13 feeds into that. If you answered yes to question 12, which grades are taught by a VSB teacher? Again, trying to take a look at the range of different classes or grades that would be taught by a VSB teacher in this optional band area. Question 14 is looking at the same thing, only in the strings program this time. So again, trying to capture how many of our VSB teachers are teaching the optional portions. And question 15 is the same as 13. It's just saying which grades are being taught. Question 16 gets into, is any music instruction at your school PAC sponsored? So now it's getting into how, if you're doing those optional things, how are those being supported within your school? And question 17, are we there? There we go. If the answer to the question 16 is yes, which music area is sponsored by the PAC? And then it's looking at, is it the choir, the band, or the strings? Maybe it's all three, maybe it's none. Well, you wouldn't answer it then, but question 18, is any music instruction at your school community, or is any music instruction at your school community sponsored? And an example there would be St. James Academy. And that's again trying to capture how much of it is being taught by VSB, how much of it is being sponsored, like taught by outside community partners or agencies. And if 19 says if the answer to question 18 is yes, which music area is sponsored by the community? Again, trying to get a sense of where these different areas, the choir, the band, or the strings programs, where are they getting supported through? And question 20 is really looking at, do families pay for any portion of the music instruction at your school? So we're trying to get a sense of how that program may be supported by families. And it's also trying to look at, we're trying to look at that equity model. So that'll help us have some information around there. And then question 21 is, if families are paying for a portion, how much are they paying? So that's a really fast run through on the questions, sort of just so that you can see what the survey was. I'm really happy to say that we got 100% return on those surveys. So it's obviously a matter that's on everybody's minds. And what we will do next is we'll take the information that we got from the survey. It closed on Friday. So we'll take that information and we'll digest it and be able to come back, with some sort of trends that we find at a future time.
Thank you so much, Jody. So I've got Trustee Parrott.
What's the definition of a music specialist?
Director Kehoe?
Mr. Chair, so some schools, like particularly the high school models, are specialists teaching music as one of the 8 courses. So in elementary school, we sometimes have a specialist, a music teacher who's doing a prep coverage, for example, or someone who's trained primarily as a music teacher. So we know all students in all grades take music as part of their basic curriculum. And some schools have opted to have a music specialist through, like some schools have a PE teacher, maybe a technology teacher, or maybe a music teacher as a specialist who provides prep or is available and qualified.
So it would be somebody who went through university in a music major?
Through the chair, yes.
It's not just somebody who can sing or play the piano.
I'll leave them to decide whether they're specialists, but for our purposes, yes, it is qualified. And for the
Thank you, Adrian. Other questions or comments for Jody? Trustee Gonzalez?
Through the chair, just, I think I know the answer to this, but I'd really like to understand what the real aim of the survey is.
The aim of the survey is to get a fulsome understanding of what it does look like in the schools right now, what the sense is of what's meeting kids' needs, and where we could meet kids' needs perhaps in a more fulsome manner.
And the second part, is it the administrators that filled out the surveys?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jody. I was just wondering also, does each school get their own budget allocation for band and strings? Is that kind of
Band and strings is an optional program, so it's not through the school-based budgeting.
Thank you so much, Jody. Really appreciate the time you took. Thank you. Can't wait for the survey results.
Yeah.
Yes, stay tuned.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great. So the next item we have here is presented also by Jody Langlois, Associate Superintendent, covering the District Mandarin Programs update.
Okay. So again, you have the report in front of you. And the purpose of this is to just update with the expansion of the Windermere program, just updating how that has come to be and how it's moving forward. So again, you're going to see that you have reports linked into, referenced in this report. And so there's one that I've referenced in January 2017 regarding the early Mandarin bilingual program transition to secondary. That was the genesis of when the Norquay students, the first cohort of Norquay students moved up into secondary. So you can read there to see how what the history was on that. And then again in September 2017, there was another report outlining the consultation process regarding the location of the secondary school for the early Mandarin bilingual program coming out of Norquay School. So that's there for your historical context to how we came to be where we are today. And the other thing that you'll see is that on September 2017, at this board meeting, the official trustee passed the resolution stating that the board approved Windermere as the secondary school site component of the early Mandarin bilingual program. So that's how it went for the early Mandarin bilingual program going from Norquay into Windermere. So now, as we move forward, we have the first cohort have now finished grade 8 at Windermere, and they will be moving on into grade 9. And so what we're looking at is expanding the district early Mandarin bilingual program into grade 9 at Windermere. And that just makes sense, right? The program expands as the kids move up. Hamber will remain the same as it has been. Jameson has traditionally, the students from the Jameson Mandarin bilingual program have fed into Hamber, and that will remain the same. What's different now is that the students attending the district early Mandarin bilingual program at Norquay, they will be given priority for attending the district early Mandarin bilingual program at Windermere. So as those students come out of Norquay, they will be given priority going into Windermere. If there are seats that remain at Windermere after the Norquay students have been admitted, students from other schools will have the opportunity to apply to the program as long as they're able to meet the language requirements. And should there be more students from other schools than apply there, then there are seats available, there'll be a lottery draw to determine which students are chosen to attend the program. Similarly, students attending the district Mandarin bilingual program at Jameson will be given priority for attending the district Mandarin bilingual program at Hamber. Should there be seats remaining at Hamber, after the Jameson students have been admitted, students from other schools will have the opportunity to apply to the program as long as they're able to meet the language requirements. And should there be more students from other schools apply than there are seats available, there will be a lottery draw to determine which students are chosen to attend the program. The piece I want to highlight for you there is should they meet the language requirements. Here, the differences between the Norquay early Mandarin bilingual program and the Jameson Mandarin bilingual program is the hours of instruction that they get. So the early Mandarin bilingual program, they have about 4,000 hours, Director Kehoe, about?
Yes.
And
sure.
So they're gonna, I'm just checking my facts. So there's about 4,000 hours coming out of there. And similarly from Jameson, it's roughly 500.
Sure, 1,000 hours.
1,000 hours. So there is a significant difference in language abilities. And so we just want to stress that we want them to feed up into the programs. They have the first choice to the programs that would match what they've come from. And that is the report.
Thank you. Really informative. Any questions, comments? Yeah, I've got Trustee Wong.
Through the chair, with regards to the program, the Norquay program going through Windermere, what are the numbers like in
the number right now? In the grade 8 class, through the chair, right now in the grade 8 class, there's about 5 students in there. We're anticipating approximately 22 coming up from grade 7 into 8 this year.
And thoughts on grade 9? Applications for that comes later, or do we have a feeling of how many will be attending the grade 9? Or is it too early to tell? Through the chair.
So through the chair. So currently the assumption is the students who are in grade 8 will continue in grade 9. And we're currently secondary schools are in the process of doing time planning and course requests. So there is a possibility that the current grade 7s will join the grade 8 group next year. So it'll be a grade 8-9 combined class with one of the electives offered in Mandarin, in addition to the language course offered in Mandarin. So that's certainly student dependent on the enrollment process. So it's not totally decided yet because it depends on student interest.
Any other questions or comments? I have one. Just around like students who arrive with Mandarin skills, how are they integrated into the program? Or can they access the program for credit if they've already met the language requirements?
If they have met the language requirements and there's room, then they would just come into the program. So a student would come in and apply, but you'd have to first have room left from the first cohort going in, and then they would apply in that second cohort, right? And if they meet the language requirements, they'd still be going through the lottery draw.
Just to follow up, if you say you arrive in grade 10, could you get credit for Mandarin at the grade 10 level and continue on grade 11, 12?
So grade 10, 11, and 12s are actually courses. So they're optional courses. It's not part of the bilingual program. May I?
Sure, I'll add one extra piece. So as is the practice in all schools where additional languages are offered, students who are native in that language have the option of taking a course at their level. So the language teacher or department at the school would assess the student, happens in French, Japanese, etc. So in this program, the same provision is there. If a student has some Mandarin and would choose to take Mandarin as opposed to French or Spanish, they have that option if there's space available. And if we find a course at a suitable level. For example, we don't necessarily want grade 8s coming in and going to grade 12 Mandarin. So there are other options such as challenge is one option. We also have other options that are available to students besides going to their grade peer level in the language. So different than other subjects, the languages will look at it a little differently, but there's lots of opportunities and options.
So I've got Trustee Fraser and then Shelby.
The phrase challenge was used. Maybe I could get an understanding of what challenge means.
Sure. So through the chair. So there is a function that exists within the province of BC. So we have a language challenge center. And I know I have two of my VSTA colleagues who are also language teachers in the audience. So they may also choose to chime in if they choose. So we have options available for students at any level who have the language in addition to English to take that course for credit. To challenge the credit. They sit an exam. It happens once a year. We have hundreds of students in our schools who take the language challenge exam. Not available in other courses, only in languages. So a lot of students who may move from overseas or may have grown up in a household where there's additional language than English, so they have the opportunity to take the challenge exam to beat their language credit for graduation.
So it's just an exam, not a taught course?
The chair, it is an exam, a challenge exam.
Thank you, Adrian. About Shelby?
Through the chair, I have a question that's kind of connected to Trustee Fraser's question. I was speaking with a parent in the district that had a child going through the Mandarin bilingual program, and she was speaking about some of the issues in the high school level faced around when there are students that are native speakers in the class. It creates kind of an inequity issue in a sense where students who it's not their first language may feel a bit uncomfortable speaking. So there's just, or just don't ever speak. So I just wanted to know if anyone has the answer at the board. if there is any type of policy around encouraging students that are native speakers to take the challenge exam versus going into a class and they already know the language perfectly.
Through the chair.
Question, I think Adrian's got a response. Sure.
Yes, there is that. The information is shared with students, but ultimately it is a family and student's choice to take that course. So we don't limit who can take a course. We certainly make recommendations sometimes based on their language level. But as it is the case in all subjects, as you know, I mean, there are students of all abilities in many of the courses. So we certainly welcome them in the language class as well. And we, like in this case with our 2 Mandarin bilingual programs, they're really designed as courses, as is French immersion, for non-native speakers of that language. That said, of course, it is once again ultimately the family's decision to register in that course.
Thank you. Final questions, comments for Jody? Thank you. Thanks so much, Jody. Double presentation. Thank you. So we'll move on to discussion items, and we have something for the projector here with a PowerPoint. All on board, which was an item carried over from our last student, or from our board meeting. No, our last student learning and wellbeing meeting. So thank you so much. So we have a couple items for consideration, just for some context. We had this delegation present at the last student learning and wellbeing meeting. They had presented a presentation with 2 young people who indicated sort of the rationale around this motion that you're receiving in paper right now. This is the original motion that was passed by the City of Vancouver on January 15th. Correct me if I'm misquoting anything from last time. And yeah, there was interest in the committee to revisit that motion once the City of Vancouver had considered it, just so we could be aligned in whatever it is that we decide to do as a board. So this is a draft motion on the board here is put forward by Trustee Wong. So as for discussion in terms of how a motion like this from the City of Vancouver could be interpreted, but it's for our committee to discuss how we either want to consider its motion in full, which you have in front of you, or an amendment or version of that. So open up for discussion. Yes, Trustee Parrott.
I certainly support that. I'm wondering why the part about the sliding scale for adopt a poverty reduction equity mandate in order to address the outstanding issue of lack of affordability isn't also included.
Comments, Trustee Wong?
Through the chair, I know there are, I think, 3 parts to the suggested recommendation by Viveka Ellis, I think you presented. This has come to the board in the past as well, and it's reflective of school-age children. And there is an argument that the sliding scale could affect families. My focus is on school teachers, classes, access to the transit system to be able to reach the community, to travel, and without all the cumbersome requirements of collecting money for the class and all that. So my focus was on school-age children specifically, and as a school board, I think that's where our focus lies. So that's I know there is 3 parts to her motion, but I think for us, this is where I wanted to go, and this is what I would support.
Other comments? I've got Darren. Sorry, that was a question. Oh, your question. Sure. So Trustee Parrott, then Darren.
Well, I absolutely agree with the reasons why this motion is a good one. I also think that it's incumbent on the board to to deal with poverty issues in our schools. They affect our schools, I'd say, in Vancouver, probably more than any other district in this province. And we're dealing with poverty, and we're dealing with homeless, we're dealing with the effects of that. And we need to make plans. We need to make a plan. We need to make we need to have a plan for dealing how the school system can help ameliorate the effects of poverty in our schools. And the sliding scale is one of those ways to ameliorate the effects when, and I've heard this from teachers and I've seen it myself in classrooms. People who live in poverty are constantly making choices. The choices that they're making aren't anything like the choices that I would make, or probably anybody at this table would have to make. They're making choices about what are we going to provide for the kids to eat, or am I going to take them to school on the bus? Those are the choices people who are poor are making. And so while I absolutely support it should be free for 18, it's got to recognize that those choices can't be made, and that people can't have to make the choice between food and getting their kids to school. It's not fair, it's not right, it's not just, and we have a responsibility as trustees, I believe, to say something about that.
Trustee Craig, I've got Darren, and then Lois Chan-Pedley.
I'd just like to add in favor of the sliding scale being added. We discussed that at our executive meeting, and particularly relating to adult ed students, which are also students in the Vancouver School Board, and they're often at-risk students. And there was a real concern about, we discussed like how the sliding scale would help them because many are over 18. In general, though, we are really strongly in favor of this program. Some points were made about life skills programs, that it would be easier for students to get out into the community as part of their education. We talked about equitable access to choice programs, particularly at HuckPay, that was mentioned. Also, we talked about how sometimes young at-risk women students have to make a choice between safety or getting a fine on the bus if they don't have fare. And as we discussed at our last meeting, how beneficial it would be for planning field trips, as a cost of charter buses and their limited availability can be a deterrent.
Thank you, Darren. I've got Trustee Chan-Pedley.
There was a third part to the motion as well, as I remember, which is to call for translating to stop ticketing minors for fare evasion. I'm wondering if, I'm wondering why that was, that's not included. I'm wondering if that could be added back.
Thank you. Trustee Long, did you want to speak to that, or did anyone else want to speak to that?
Sure. That third part of that motion, there was I'm not sure if it was discussed by Viveka, but alternative ways of addressing that fare evasion of community service or something like that, which I would be supportive of. But I just wanted to keep it clean and to focus strictly on this motion at the time with regards to the fare evasion and the ticketing. I'm open to it, but there's a further discussion that's required, and whether it's fines, whether it's community service, there's a whole other way of handling it. This I feel very strongly about, and so that's my focus on this particular motion.
I've got myself, I've got Trustee Parrott, and then Trustee Cho. I do want to, Shelby first, then me, then Trustee Parrott, then Trustee Cho. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, through the chair. I just wanted to say that the STA is also in support of this motion, and I would also agree all the other aspects of potentially adding to the motion, like the sliding scale, getting rid of ticketing of youth, and in particular for Vancouver high schools. All of these motions would decrease some of the equity issues from the west side to the east side schools, particularly with field trips, things like that. Teachers do a lot of work on east side schools for trying to fundraise for things like field trips, whereas it's a lot easier on a west side school to do a field trip. So it is definitely an equity issues.
Thanks, Shelby. And to me, I just wanted to also suggest that I really appreciated like the all-encompassing nature of the motions that were brought forward, that we understand that children are a part of families, and that it speaks to the fact that we do have adult students as well in our district that would be benefited from accessible or sliding scale transit, and that fare evasion tickets based on our delegation last time, we're also suggesting how that follows them into their adulthood with collections agencies and other ongoing credit issues, and just wanting to understand how that really does affect the way a young person starts their adult life. So I would be in full support of the kind of more discussing the full motion for that reason, in addition to the 0 to 18 free transit aspect. So I wanted to go to Trustee Parrott and then Trustee Cho.
I wouldn't be opposed to adding that to the motion. I just think it's putting the cart before the horse. If we want, what we want is free transit for 0 to 18. But if we can't get that, at least let's get rid of the fees, the fines, right? Well, there won't be any fines if it's free. So I'd sooner focus on pushing for the free transit, and then if it looks like it's not going to happen, we could then say, well, then all right, let's not have fines, which will make it free, won't it? If you don't fine people for not paying, it will be free.
I've got Trustee Chan Pedley.
No, I was going to say what Barb said.
Oh, I, based on kind of my understanding of how these kinds of stuff work, though, making it free doesn't necessarily wipe out past infractions, and so I guess I'm hoping there's something that addresses if we make it free, also make sure that minors who are taken before are forgiven, essentially. But yeah, that might be a really messy amendment to this motion, and I don't know.
Trustee Fraser.
Well, it seems as though there's broad support from around the committee for this motion. I think what might be helpful going forward is if we could get wording drafted for a sliding scale with reference to adult education students and family poverty, and also something relating to if there were not to be free transit, and maybe use the wording here as a cease ticketing minors as a first step towards that, and then talk about the erasing what we have. So maybe a way forward is to have that wording circulated among trustees before the board meeting, so that we have some preparation for the decision making there, because I think that would capture the discussion in the room at this committee.
Thank you, Trustee Fraser. I would, definitely second that, and I want to suggest that we would continue to keep this at the forefront as the motion was passed by the City of Vancouver and the request of this group last time, to make sure that whatever we do decide does align with what the City of Vancouver has put forward, that we're not going against that. Any other final questions or comments on this topic? Trustee Chan Pedley.
Can you remind me of the timeline that we need to get this done by?
Good question. Does anybody have that information from the last meeting? I recall that there was some urgency for the month of February and that we needed to wait until the end of January to see the minutes from the City of Vancouver. That's one piece of the timeline, and that our next board meeting is February 13th? 25th? There's not a special board meeting? Okay, sorry. So the next board meeting is February 25th.
So just to clarify, is then this is going straight to the board meeting then?
Does it work, just as a suggestion, thank you, Rob, that if we draft the wording based on what the discussion was here to have sort of the fair evasion piece first and then the free ticketing or free fares from 0 to 18, and then talking about the adult ed students circulated to this committee for consideration, and then bringing that to the next board meeting. I don't want to lose track though of that timeline, and I wasn't sure what that timeline was. So I'm wondering if there's a way to include that in the notes circulating so that we'll know the urgency of it coming forward. Okay, thank you. Trustee Fraser?
I'm just curious if this is the motion, this looks like the motion that came before council. I'm wondering if it was the motion passed by council, because I understand there were some amendments made.
I've got the one from the minutes.
So thank you for that, Trustee Fraser.
That could be included if something goes out.
Yes, so that will be included in the package is the after the approved motion from the City of Vancouver to ensure that we're looking at the most recent draft. Any other final comments? Okay, super. Thank you. So last two items here under items for approval. One is around board authority authorized courses by Aaron Davis, Director of Instruction.
Thank you, through the chair. So board authority approved courses. This is in reference to goal number 1, which is to engage our learners through innovative teaching and learning practices, and the objective number 1, which is to provide increased opportunities to connect students to their learning. So from the strategic plan. Just as an introduction, board authority authorized courses are offered by boards of education or independent school authorities to respond to the local needs of schools and their communities while providing choice and flexibility for students. BAA courses are authorized by board and authorities according to the requirements set by the Ministry of Education. So for background, we have a lot of BAA courses that exist in Vancouver already that have been passed over the years. However, with a redesigned curriculum, all previously approved grade 11 and 12 courses, BAA courses, that we wish to offer in 2019-20 and on need to be revised to align with the new ministry curriculum to reflect the ministry's Know, Do, Understand curriculum design by July 1st, 2019. Current grade 11 and 12 BAA courses that do not meet the new ministry criteria will be retired July 1st, 2019. We went through this process, just for those of you who are not part of this committee last year, for our grade 10 courses. And this is because grade 10 curriculum was introduced for 2018-19, and the 11-12 curriculum is being introduced in 2019-20. When reviewing revised grade 11 and 12 BAA course proposals, the following ministry criteria are considered. So there can be overlap with big ideas and curricular competencies of the ministry courses. However, there's a bunch of things that they cannot. There are 4 items. One is that the courses cannot have significant overlap with provincial curriculum content. There's some examples provided in the document. Remedial courses, or those that are preparatory in nature, cannot be BAA courses. And again, 2 examples are provided in the report. Third, it cannot be a modified course. So that would be a course that has targeted to students potentially with intellectual disabilities and significantly different learning standards from the ministry exploration in Social Studies 11. They cannot be an adapted course. Adaptations are teaching and assessment strategies especially designed to accommodate a student's needs so they can demonstrate that they are meeting the learning standards of the curriculum, and a student working to meet learning standards of any grade or course level may be supported through the use of adaptations. That's the background. Then the work began. This committee is actually composed of myself and district management representation from the VSTA, Terry Stanway, who has dedicated a ton of work. I want to thank Terry. 3 secondary school administrators from VASA, Alec McGinnis, Rudy Desai, and David Bach, and Karen Blake, who is our program coordinator in career programs. So over the past 4 months, we have reviewed 68, make context there, 68, that's a lot, of grade 11 and 12 BA courses that were revised and submitted for review. The BA committee, guided by the criteria outlined above, reviewed the proposals, provided feedback, and the opportunities for resubmission. The committee recommends approval of 43 of the 68 proposals. And the following courses are listed for recommendation for approval in Table 1. I'm not going to read the entire list. And also for reference, I have provided a short course synopsis of the 43 courses. They are on pages 3 to 10 in this report. The recommendation then from the BA committee and to this committee is that the board approves the 43 revised grade 11 and 12 BA courses listed in Table 1 as submitted.
Thank you. Thanks so
You're
much.
welcome. Brevity for a long process.
Yes. So any questions or comments for Erin, Trustee Parrott, Trustee Chan-Pedley?
Is there a minimum number of students that have to register for these courses for them to go ahead?
Through the chair, that would be a timetabling issue, which is independent of the BA process. So if a BA course is approved by the Board of Trustees, then it becomes an option that secondary schools can offer. And whether a secondary school offers a BEA course or a Ministry of Education existing course is dependent on student sign up. Schools have flexibility about how many students meet that threshold to meet their local need.
And can trustees sign up for something?
If you meet the registration requirements for our schools, yes, you could. Through the chair.
Excellent answer. Trustee Chan-Pedley?
Thank you, through the chair. I want to clarify kind of the intention here. These BA courses are authorized by board's authorities according to requirements set by the MOE. Does that mean we can't authorize something that don't meet the requirements? And if can we continue to like offer these classes, or do teachers continue to do that maybe on a voluntary basis or something? And is that allowed or not allowed, or what's the procedure policy on that?
Through the chair, I think there's actually 2 questions in there. One, can we continue to offer courses that don't meet the requirements? The answer would be no, we cannot. So the ministry has the ministry has said that courses that will be offered in 2019-20 have to meet the requirements if it's a BAA course. So the committee knows what there's an extensive documentation that we follow, and so reviews it and then has made a recommendation whether or not that course should be submitted for approval. So that was the first part. Sorry, the second one, I'm trying to remember what the second part of your question was. Yes, can they volunteer? No, thank you very much. So again, through the chair, teachers cannot, well, principals ultimately are the ones who are responsible for what courses are offered in the schools. And if a course is not recommended or approved by the Ministry of Education or from the Board of Trustees, it cannot be offered.
So I've got Trustee Fraser and then Shelby.
There were a number of courses, there were more courses proposals submitted than courses approved. Was that because they didn't meet the Ministry of Education requirements?
Through the chair, there's typically a couple of reasons why. The revised curriculum first has a lot of new courses within it. And so many of the BAA courses that had previously existed or have now been wrapped up into the new curriculum. The redesigned curriculum is about providing more choice and relevancy to students, which the BAA courses are intended to do. So I'll give you an example. In fitness, physical education, we have a lot of courses around Fit for Life or fitness and conditioning that were previously approved BAA courses. The new PE curriculum actually reflects that, and they have active living, and so therefore there's no longer a need. The second piece is that sometimes a course will be submitted and the authors of the course, and it's typically teachers that want to offer it, has too much overlap with existing courses. And so the committee makes a determination of how much is too much overlap and whether or not can it be achieved in a different course somewhere else. One of the pieces that's sometimes difficult is that the author may be writing the course and they're coming from a tech studies perspective, and the content that they're trying to drive at is actually relocated somewhere else in the curriculum that they may not have thought to look. So there's a variety of reasons why that may be the case that happens.
Thank you. How about Shelby and then myself?
Through the chair, so secondary teachers really appreciate these courses and being able to teach them their passions. And some of these courses do fill some of the unfortunate gaps in the new curriculum, some of the grad requirements that could be there, such as more environmental education curriculum and climate change education curriculum. And it's unfortunate that those aren't mandatory in the new curriculum, but for graduation requirements, but it's good that we have these opportunities for students in Vancouver by locally developed courses.
Thank you so much, Shelby. I just had a question around the availability of the courses to all students. Can any student access these courses in any high school?
So through the chair, the school itself dictates, but decides what courses it will offer. If you were to look at our 18 secondary schools, you would see that there may be 1 or 2 courses at John Oliver that are not offered at University Hill, and that's usually for a couple of reasons. One, whether or not there's a qualified teacher to teach that particular course. When it comes to BAA, is there a teacher that has a specific interest to offer that? So it can come up through student choice. It's usually why it's arrived, but it's also heavily influenced by a teacher preference that I've got a real passion in this area and I want to extend what's already in the curriculum.
And the second part to that, does adult ed also access the courses in the same way?
So through the chair, these courses have been approved by the board. I might defer to Adrian.
So through the chair, certainly all courses that are approved are available. However, the clientele usually in adult ed are students who are upgrading academic courses. The majority of our students are actually graduates of a post-secondary institution already. So it is possible that some of the courses are offered, and usually offered in a self-paced model as opposed to class studying traces.
We'll just add through the chair that VLN, which is our distributed learning, can offer these courses. So the intent of these courses is that they are not specific to a school site or a delivery model.
So VLN is open to any age?
Through the chair, these BAA courses are for grade 10, 11, and 12. Those are the grades that are targeted.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments about Trustee Fraser?
I just say I really appreciate the passion of the teachers who go through the effort to create an entire course for students, and thank you to them for doing that, and also for the committee that reviewed 68 curriculum for grade 11 or grade 12. There's a lot of reading going on in our district with that and the policy governance committee with the administrative procedures. So, a lot of it's not the forward-facing work that gets the headlines and gets a lot of attention. But I know there's a lot of great work going on in the district, and it's coming from teachers, and it's coming from working groups, and it's coming from all different parts of our system working together so that our students do have better opportunities.
Any other questions or comments?
Ever server teacher.
Thank you so much. So the last item here under items for approval is coming from Magdalena Cassis, Director of Instruction, about the school calendar.
Great. So we're looking at planning ahead here. And what we're looking at doing, and this is a recommendation for our school calendar for the next 3 years, looking at major holidays, so spring break and winter break for the next 3 school years, as well as the non-instructional days, professional days for next school year. So just as a bit of background for trustees and for the committee, so under the School Act, under the calendar regulation, board must submit for approval to the ministry at least 3 months ahead of the end of current school year, must submit a calendar for approval. And so that brings us for our purposes, March 31st, which is why we're bringing this to you now. I just want to acknowledge as well that the work in this report really is a culmination of a district calendar committee, a great amount of work that's gone through with them. So I do want to acknowledge Chloe McKnight from Vesta, Catherine Shipley from VSTA, Tim Krug from FEPFA, Michelle Wood and Ranjit Bains from VASA, Debbie Mohabir and Thomas from QP, Jennifer Cook from VASA, Tim Chester, IUOE, and Deepak. We had Crystal Smith last year and Alex Dow this year. So just their great input. Just to clarify again under the School Act now, because it has become a little bit different historically. So it's now up to boards individually to determine the beginning and the end of school years, the length of school days, and the number of instructional days and the timetable within a school year. So that, for historical reasons, is different from what we might have seen about 8 or 10 years ago. What the ministry does mandate is the number of instructional hours that students must have. So for the purposes here, we've got outlined the number of hours for each grade level. It differs for kindergarten, elementary, and secondary. So just a note that for the proposed calendars that we have, the number of instructional hours actually quite exceeds the minimum. So we are well over what, we would be well over what the ministry mandates. Again, just a bit of history. So this school year that we're in right now is actually the last of a previously approved 3-year multi-year calendar that the Board of Trustees approved in March of 2015. So we're into our last year of a 3-year cycle. So we're looking to plan ahead for the next 3-year cycle. And also historically, what the committee and what our district calendar committee has decided for practical reasons is to look at non-instructional days or professional days 1 year at a time, because as interests change and desires for booking speakers and those sorts of things, we're not wanting to plan that too far ahead. And that is also the wish of the district committee and seems to make the most sense. However, there has been a huge request that we've seen, especially from parents around the district, for us to plan ahead as much as possible for the major breaks. We have come to realize that many employers in the city and around Metro Vancouver do require that workers put in their vacation requests up to and over a year ahead of time. So we have heard even from nurses and so on who are parents that they do need to plan well ahead of time. So we want to be able to respect that. One of the things that we've done is ensure that we've worked really closely with all our neighboring districts. So the dates that the calendar committee has chosen for the spring breaks and the winter breaks are exactly the same dates as almost all of our metro districts. So Richmond, Surrey, Delta, North Vancouver, West Vancouver, Burnaby, Langley, Chilliwack, Sunshine Coast, and New Westminster. And we've come to realize that it's really important not only for parents, but also for staff who might live in neighboring districts and who have children in other districts, that we want to make sure that we're aligning as much as possible. So that would be for the winter breaks and spring breaks for the next 3 years. In terms of the non-instructional days, one of the things that has been talked about, a few things have been talked about quite a bit at the calendar committee that we have all agreed on. And just for the sake of the committee, for this committee to know, is that there's a real agreement that we don't ever, as much as possible, don't ever want to be in a situation where we have a 3-day school week. We want there to be as much instructional opportunity for students as possible. So that's where we look at avoiding at all possible having a professional day on a week where there's already a stat holiday. So that sort of example. What we also have come to hear from parents especially is the desire for non-interrupted instruction as much as possible. So for that reason, we've chosen to put non-instructional days or professional days either on Mondays or Fridays. Having said that, what we have chosen to do is what our district has done historically for the last several years to allow some flexibility for schools is to have 2 of the non-instructional days, what we call flexible days, where schools can apply and choose to change that date. And those dates we'll come to those in a little bit, but the September date traditionally and the January date we have set, but those are dates that schools can request to change. The other 4 non-instructional days are district-wide days, and for the sake of families and staff and district professional planning, those are set district-wide and are not changeable. In terms of the consultation process, there is a consultation process that is mandated through the Ministry of Education, which we have met and we try to improve on every year as well. So we are mandated to make sure that we consult with our stakeholders, and that we do through our district calendar committee, and each stakeholder representative then confers with their membership as well. We do work very closely with human resources because of some technicalities to ensure that ETO and those sorts of things which are needed to be met are done so properly. In terms of parent consultation, the ministry does require that we publish to parents at least 30 days ahead of the calendar being put forward, that we publish that to parents and that we ask for feedback and act on it where possible. So we did publish on our website at the end of November, we published the proposed winter holidays for the next 3 years, as well as spring break for next year. And about a month ago, we published the remaining 2 years of spring break, as well as the non-instructional days. About a month ago, we also sent out through all principals a notice which would have gone to all parents in the district, either through newsletter, email, that sort of thing, making sure that parents knew what the dates were that were proposed and asking for any feedback. The feedback from parents has been helpful over the years, to be honest, and has shaped our practice in terms of improving our calendar every year. We do hear, honestly, 50-50 from parents. Some parents who feel that the winter breaks and spring breaks are too short, and they ask for longer. So especially at winter time, some families families who like to travel overseas, who find that it's too rushed and they would like to have more than 2 weeks. Again, some families who have asked for spring break to be a little bit longer. We also get, again, almost half the number of parents telling us that the breaks are too long and they would like their children to be in school and have less holiday time. We do hear from parents fairly regularly about non-instructional days, that they like those where possible to be backed up to long weekends for planning purposes and daycare purposes, and again the Monday and Friday, so we try and be cognizant to that as well. We've had some from secondary schools. We definitely get feedback around making sure that we are balancing the day 1 and day 2 for non-instructional days. So that's something that we've really taken into consideration and worked really hard to make sure that there's balance for the students. So that being said, the dates that are before you here would include the spring break and winter break for the next 3 years. And again, those are dates that are similar to what our neighboring districts have, and as well as the non-instructional days for next school year. So that's for recommendation.
Thank you, Magdalena. Thanks so much. Any questions or comments on the calendar? Got Darren and then Trustee Parrott.
There's some feedback from Vesta that with the professional days all on Mondays and Fridays, for part-time teachers, it poses some issues about equitable access to their professional development. if they don't work on those days. And as well for itinerant staff, for example, like teacher counselors, their schedule is fixed through the year. So the schools that they service on Mondays and Fridays have reduced service with all the professional days on Mondays and Fridays. So we would like to see more flexible days even so that we could have more of the days spread throughout the week for more equitable access.
And through the chair, I did want to mention that as well, because that's something that did come up, and it does come up every year at calendar committee. So just to acknowledge that that is something that Vesta has talked about, and that's one of the reasons that we've come to agreement for now on having those 2 flexible days, so that schools where that is a concern have that flexibility of choosing if they wish to have a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday for at least 2 days, and then that way it would allow the flexibility for those schools to determine which day makes the most sense, because some teachers might work 1 day a week and we wouldn't want to presume which one that would be. So yeah, that is something that's come up through Chloe.
Trustee Parrott. Trustee Fraser.
Do the extra hours that teachers work, is that what pays for the extra week at spring break?
So through the chair, teachers are paid on a monthly, right? So teachers aren't paid on an hourly basis. So teachers are contracted to work from September 1st through to the end of June for all intents and purposes. So teachers aren't needing to work extra hours or anything in that sense. And no, it's not teacher hours that would make up for that. It's what we're doing now is ensuring that the minimum number of instructional hours are met, and boards are given the flexibility of what that looks like and when those weeks are. So we could choose to take spring break in April if we wish, but our preference is to stay with our Metro colleagues for now.
So what happens, how are the extra hours accommodated then, or are they not? Like it says that teachers work more hours than the minimum. So is that like, did they get time in lieu or?
So again, through the chair, and I know Associate Superintendent Batista might want to add to this, it's not about what's mandated is instructional hours as opposed to teacher hours. And again, teachers are paid, to my understanding, on a contract from September through to June. And there's no extra hours that are needing to be made up for teacher purposes in that sense. There are some agreements with our employees that are hourly, such as QP and IUOE, where there is an ETO agreement, but that's not a cost factor to my knowledge.
Thank you. Carmen, did you want to add?
I just wanted to confirm that it's really instructional minutes. So a day in the past may have been 300 minutes and it's 313 minutes, but then there's 2 weeks for spring break where in the past there would have only been a 1 week spring break.
That's what I said. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Carmen. Any other questions or comments on the calendar? I've got Trustee Fraser. Thank you.
It seems as though we did the board did a 3-year plan from 2015 to now. Is it possible to do a rolling 3-year plan so that, next year it's still 3 years out? So in addition to doing the instructional days for that year, you look forward to the 2022, 2023 year, or is that getting ahead of our Metro colleagues?
Through the chair, that's certainly a possibility. Some of our Metro District colleagues are looking at a 5-year plan, so we're certainly in a situation to, if the board wishes, we're certainly in a situation to be working ahead, so as to domino a little bit, yeah.
Questions or comments further for Magdalena?
Just to follow up on that, are you saying you could do it if the board wished, or you think it's a good idea and it will happen without the board saying that? Or maybe that's a question for the superintendent.
So the question on the floor is just whether or not we plan for 2022-23 next year rather than waiting for the expiration of this current 3-year plan.
So given that the process is fairly consultative with our partners, we would probably have that conversation with them and see if there was an interest in doing that, and then bring that forward to the board through staff.
Thank you. So this will go forward to the next board meeting in February. Okay. So if there's no other items tonight, that brings our meeting to an end. Thank you everyone for sticking it out, everyone online and here in the audience. We can cut the feed now. So motion to adjourn at 8:50 p.m. Thanks, Trustee Joe.
Can I get people's attention just for one moment? One of the people who was presenting earlier would like to share some reflections about their experience here specifically.
First, I'd like to thank you for listening to me and the other presenters here. What I wanted to address, though, when I spoke the second time, I noticed, Rob, that you kind of leaned back in your chair and rolled your eyes. And you may have not noticed that. My colleague here and peer noticed it as well. And I found it to be disrespectful of my time and what I had to say. So I just wanted to point that out.
And just wanted to reiterate that the nonverbal behaviors that we engage in, whether they're intentional or unintentional, do impact people's decisions to come forward and their perceptions of commitment by both the people who are engaged in the activity as well as those of us who witness it and don't say anything.
So through the chair, just to comment, I apologize for that. That was not in my intention. I was not aware of that behavior. My intent here this evening is to be respectful of everyone that is presenting in the words that they speak. So I just want to reiterate that, and I appreciate the comment that has been received. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that forward. Thanks.